Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight we'll be celebrating the goofy and gooey charms of Tremors, directed by Ron Underwood, which made its inauspicious big screen debut in 1990. With a script that recalls the heyday of 1950s monster movies by S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock, joyfully executed practical effects, and a terrific ensemble featuring Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Michael Gross, Reba McEntire, and Victor Wong, it quickly became a cult favorite on home video, eventually spawning 6 sequels and a short-lived TV series. Grab your elephant guns and don't make a sound. Here comes Tremors.
Perfection. A scorched outpost in the middle of nowhere.
You know how close I am to leaving this place right now? How close?
Maybe that's why Val and Earl decided to leave town.
Hey, hold up. That's Edgar Deems.
They just picked the wrong day to do it.
Jeez. You guys better get the hell out of here. There's a killer on the loose. Who could be doing it?
Is that a snake?
I'll give you boys $5 for this. 20. That's how they get you. They're under the ground.
What the hell are those things? How could they eat a whole station wagon?
But where do they come from?
I vote for outer space. No way these are local boys.
You see, they're headed right for us.
No Richter scale can measure it.
They're coming!
No scientist can explain it.
Bert, they're under the ground.
You didn't get penetration even with the elephant gun.
Run, run!
And no one knows what to call it.
Megaworms or suckers or suckoids.
Now, this valley is just one long smorgasbord.
Now, it's up to Val and Earl to save the world.
That's one big mother.
Who died and made you Einstein?
And they know just what to do. Flip for it.
Damn.
Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Tremors.
They say there's nothing new under the sun, but beneath the ground. We're going to be talking about Tremors celebrating its 35th anniversary, and we got an awesome panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Mark Easteadt,
Stampede.
Chris Hainsworth,
Don't follow stupid with stupid.
Eric Fritzius,
We just giving advice now. Never wear brown pants with white shoes.
and Daniel Millhouse.
Hi.
Which is going to work so well on the audio version.
Wow, what's that quiet pause? I just did rock, paper, scissors with no shoot.
And we're going to be chatting about Tremors 1990, again celebrating its 35th anniversary and its wealth of sequels, which include Tremors 2, AFTERSHOCKS, Tremors 3, Back to Perfection, 2001, Tremors 4, The Legend Begins, 2004, Tremors 5, Bloodlines, 2015, Tremors, No Number, A Cold Day in Hell, 2018, and 2020's Tremors, Shrieker Island. Thanks for coming on shore, buddy, and welcome. We're going to kick things off as we usually do, which is talk about people's origin stories, how they came to Tremors for the first time, and then maybe along that introduction, where you came to the sequels, if you came to the sequels. Why don't we kick things off with Eric?
I'm pretty sure this was a rental for me in high school. I can't imagine this came to the little four-screen cinemaplex that we had in Starkville, Mississippi. So this would probably have been one of the schlocky horror rentals that me and my friends would do on Friday and Saturday nights. We were familiar with, Kevin Bacon. I didn't particularly like him, but I'd seen Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins in the theater no less than 3 times. So to me, Fred Ward was already like acting royalty. So I was on board for that, but we didn't have a lot of big expectations from this. But very quickly into Tremors, this movie is way better than it even needs to be. And so we found ourselves becoming fans of it very quickly.
I'll bounce over to Daniel.
It's so amazing that so many of these podcasts have been like my true firsts for a lot of things, like Ghostbusters, Terminator. This might have been my first actual monster movie when I was growing up, the first one. And I remember I was so obsessed with it. I remember any long car rides, staring out the window and imagining like a graboid was following along underneath the ground kind of thing. I just have a visceral memory of doing that with my mind's eye. And I can't remember how I saw the second one. I know my dad introduced me to the first one, but I remember the third one finding at a Blockbuster. Like, you're going through and all of a sudden there's Tremors 3 Back to Perfection. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then rented it from there. And I remember the fourth one was like a Walmart on their stands that I just bought because I love the first three. And then I didn't even know about the fifth one until many years after it was released. Longtime fan, longtime watcher.
Mark?
I actually did see it in theaters back in the day. It was one of the times in my life where I was going to many, many movies in the theaters. And a friend and I, who always went together, saw it, loved it, have quoted it incessantly since. I still will argue, and we can talk about later, has the best F-bomb in cinema history. And I watched the second sequel last Wednesday. I was aware as they each came out, but I was like, I don't know if I can like ruin the sanctity of the original. It's always been such a favorite.
That's fair. Chris?
I saw this on the big screen when I was in college in Normal, Illinois. Went to the Normal Theater. Meet a bunch of friends from the theater department and just had a ball. I've owned this movie in every incarnation. As I upgrade my media, I've owned a copy. It's like, oh, I had it on VHS and then I had it on DVD and now I have it on Blu-ray. And as soon as that TV craps out when you upgrade to the 4K, I will see if there's a 4K version of the first one. The second one I saw, that was like a early home video. Like directly made for home video. It never hit the theater, so it was only available for rental. And watched it as soon as it came out. And then 3 through 7 I've watched in the past 2 weeks, but preparing for this episode. So
awesome.
I hadn't seen them before, but I have seen them all. Have not seen the series. I was like, there's a series? So anyway, here we are.
Well, I have to say my origin story pretty much echoes yours, Chris, because I went and saw it in my little college town of Greeley, Colorado, with a bunch of theater people. And we just thought it was so great. Like we were not anticipating it being as enjoyable as it was, because it kind of came out, I think, like early in the year. So, which is usually, not the best sign that this is a good movie. And certainly Kevin Bacon didn't think it was a good sign for his career, because it didn't do very well in its theatrical release, which is why I'm delighted to hear that you, Mark, and I all saw it in the theater. Because it was just great fun. Kevin Bacon, I remember, had big name above the title as though he was going to be the main attraction. But I think he turns in a really nice performance. And yes, his chemistry with Fred Ward, who I had seen for the first time in Southern Comfort, where he's a real bad dude, and then seeing Remo Williams and going, this guy can do anything. And then he did do everything in Tremors. But I think we have a wonderful ensemble. We have great special effects. It's just a really fun monster movie. And it was one that I don't think gets enough love and or respect, which is how it found its way into our book, Hidden Horror, because it feels underrated, despite the fact that there are 7 movies in the Tremors universe and a TV series. So, but yes, let's kick things off with the original Tremors from 1990. When we think about what makes this movie work so well, what are some of the elements that I think are key for it?
It's funny because I actually have what I call my Tremors Jurassic Park Lost World equation, in that Tremors to me is a fun, good action horror film in that you have everyday people encountering extreme circumstances and adapting to the situation and encountering and doing their best to stay alive. And then in Lost World, you have a bunch of scientists and professional hunters going onto an island full of dinosaurs and doing things like wearing headphones while on point, or saying how dinosaurs can smell for 4 miles, and yet you get covered in tyrannosaur blood and don't think to take the jacket off. So it's that kind of, for me, Tremors works so well because it's really a character-driven piece and that escalates as it goes along. And like, I love Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon together. That it's a chemistry that you don't see in many movies, but they work well together, and you care about them, and you're with them every step of the way, and you want them to survive. That's why I love the movie so much. I think it should be taught in film schools because it's the perfect use of characters are introduced quickly. You know who they are. The plot kicks off right away. It escalates. And, it's not people having to be dumb in order to die. It's people, if they do get killed, then it's because they've been caught off guard by a change in the circumstances that is not like a twist or, oh, now they can fly. It's just, they didn't foresee it coming.
I think it's not like Scream as a movie, but it's like Scream in that they're both satires of a genre, but lovingly so that you can read them as the satire, but they also are a perfect example of the genre that they're trying to parody. So it is a great like B-movie, creature feature, and the nuclear scare kind of stuff from the 50s. It's a perfect example of it, but it also satirizes it so well at the same time. And, so I just love the fact when movies can do that. Like, we can point out the silliness of it while still like engaging in it and loving it.
Well, and I think the characters are also aware that said 50s monster movies existed, and they're kind of like, what is happening right now? We also have characters that respond to things via humor, as opposed to not being invested in the situation and joking. They are just going, what is actually happening right now, and responding to it in a heightened way that feels authentic. And then we have awesome monsters as well. Daniel?
Yeah, I think Chris talking about like the character-driven aspect, like that beginning of the first movie, I think it dives right into Val and Earl, their relationship. And it's so interesting because the plot is they just decide to leave. They want to get out of perfection. That's it. And it's so funny that every time they try to leave, it like evolves each time they try to leave, where first it's they find the guy dehydrated up there, and then they have to go back, and then they leave again, and then they find someone decapitated, and then they go back, and then they go to leave again, and then they find the roads blocked. And it's just like brilliant in its construction and how quickly it happens.
Is there a higher power at work?
Yeah, that's right. Like the writing, I just think is so brilliant. I could see when I was rewatching it this time, inspirations from Jaws, like how to keep the tension building. Yep. And in a way, even more tense than Jaws, because we are always on land, whereas sometimes they're not in the water in Jaws. And yeah, I remember I was watching it in my office at the college, and a student came in and they were like, "What is this movie?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Tremors." They were like, "When was it made?" I said 1990, and they were like, "These practical effects are fantastic."
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, they're great."
For all the big splashy practical effects with the graboids and the tongues and what have you, I was watching this with an eye toward how cheaply and effective a lot of the other effects are. Like, you just had the little puffs of smoke through the desert, which shows you the direction the graboid is going underground. How cheap is that? Very, very cheap. Don't have any need for CGI. And then you've got the patented Evil Dead / Critters tracking shot at ground level to show that they're underground. They do a couple of underground movement shots, but by and large, it's the tracking shot above ground, just at the ground surface. Super cheap, super effective. You don't notice how cheaply the entertainment before you is, because when it gets to the other end, chances are the graboid's going to come out and do something impressive.
Yeah, those mechanical effects that you're talking about, like things like fence posts falling over and buildings bumping up and down. Daniel referenced Jaws. I mean, those puffs of smoke to me are the yellow barrels, as we're going and chasing the giant shark. We know where the shark is by where the barrel is, and we know where the graboids are because of where the puffs of smoke are, but we don't actually have to show them all the time. And I love old school monster movies. So you put a big puppet in front of me, I'm going to, yes, but I realize I'm a certain breed. And so much like Bruce the Shark, we want to use it sparingly. We want to use it and convey things and shoot things from different angles. But I love the fact that these characters are smart, they are resourceful, and they are constantly being challenged. So they have to continue upping their game and changing their tactics.
Yeah, and I was actually listening to everyone. Like, again, the script writing, how each Graboid is dealt with in that first movie is engaging and exciting.
Plus the whole slow reveal of what the Graboid is, because at first you just see these snake things coming out of the ground and you think that's it. And it's not until much later in the movie that you find out, oh no, that's just a small part of the larger monster. And now there's something else that they're dealing with. Like when they find, and there are just moments like when they find the car that got pulled with BB Besh in it, that got pulled into the ground, that like their reaction to that of like, oh, what is going, like nobody's too cool for school in this movie. They're like legitimately freaking out. And I'm like, yes, that is the proper reaction. That is how people would react in this situation. They wouldn't be like, well, that happened. It's like, no, there's something we've never encountered before, and we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Well acted across, I think, the whole ensemble.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And I was just going to talk about that. Like, I mean, the fact that we have Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward kind of as Val and Earl are two handymen, resourceful guys who, seem to do all the dirty work in this town of 14. And we are introduced to each one of those 14 characters, and each of them, which I think is pretty incredible for an ensemble of 14, each of them makes a memorable appearance. Even the smaller characters like the doctor and the doctor's wife, we remember that sequence.
I remember they're like, oh yeah, they were building a house. They had dreams. It's like, it's so efficient in the way that they just introduce these two people who you only know for 5 minutes, but their death leaves an impression on you.
Yeah.
Even like, what is it, Farmer Joe? I can't remember the guy's name with all the sheep. No dialogue, but you get a sense of his character explicitly just by what he's wearing. He has his job. He seems perfectly fine in this life.
Supposedly there was a cut scene with him and Edgar Deems, the guy up in the tower, that they showing how they like were friends and stuff. But I guess they felt it was like too boring.
Additionally, we have our characters of Michael Gross and Reba McEntire of the Gummers, who proved to be extremely memorable and unexpectedly so, because neither of those actors, Reba was a country singer at the time. This was one of her first acting jobs, if not her first. And Michael Gross was known for playing the befuddled dad on Family Ties opposite Michael J. Fox. Both of them are really, really memorable. These kind of gun-happy, what do we call them? Survivalists.
Yeah.
I remember reading about this in Starlog magazine before getting the chance to see it, and seeing a picture of Michael Gross with, the weaponry out, blowing away graboids, and thinking, I don't know if I can believe the hippie peacenik dad from Family Ties as the survivalist. And now that's kind of what he's become. That's kind of what his archetype is these days. He's known more for Burt Gummer probably than the dad on Family Ties.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's played that role for 30 years now, which is pretty incredible.
He has one of my favorite lines in the movie. It's like, yeah, it's a slow burn. It's my cannon fuse. Why do you have cannon fuse? For my cannon. That's just, that tells you everything you need to know about Burt Gummer right there. And it's so simply delivered. Michael Gross, I saw him do art in Chicago 20 years ago. And I grew up with him as Mr. Keaton on Family Ties. And I even like him in Cool as Ice, for God's sakes. I mean, whatever the job is, he treats it like it's important. It's not like you never get the sense that he's showing up for a paycheck. He invests fully, and we'll get more into it as the series goes along, but he's in for a penny, in for a pound in all of these movies. And I do appreciate that about him. Everybody, like you said, there's humor about the characters, but nobody is like stupid or stereotypical. And that's a character who could be that, and he is not. And neither is Reba McEntire. She's like, when he gets upset, she's like, no, just walk away. They're just a couple of idiots. It's like there's just more levels to them than, once again, anybody would have a right to expect in this situation.
Yep.
And I think it's amazing you brought up one of his lines. There's lines I use from Burt Gummer. Still like his doing what I can with what I got. I don't think that's even in the first one, but he does become like an iconic character. Like I am completely out of ammo. And it's like, you can tell that's never happened to this guy. It's just like such rich character building for him. Or in the second one, he has another great one when he's in the bulldozer, where he's like, I was the lack of intel or something.
Yeah, I was not given the proper information or something along those lines. Yes.
And Reba McEntire, as you said, she's very sensible. I think she's a great kind of grounded performance, especially for it being one of her first.
And speaking of Reba, like the music for this first one,
yeah,
it kind of juxtaposes everything that's going on. And something else, when I was rewatching it, after watching so many different type of horror movies now, it's all like in the daylight. Even when it's nighttime, it's so well lit. I just love that you can see everything. Because sometimes horror movies now, it's just the opposite. And not in a good way. Like, I mean, Aliens is dark, I think, in a great way. Because, you know, it hides the alien in there, or you can see it a little bit. But I thought it's fascinating to keep everything so bright.
Kind of what we're talking about with the characters. I mean, a lot of credit goes to our screenwriters and our director, Ron Underwood. This was, I think, his feature debut. Certainly, the screenwriting team of Wilson and Maddock had come off of Short Circuit. They had some success with that. And so their manager had asked, what else you got? And they had this story that was, at the time, I think it was titled Land Sharks, which makes sense, but also they couldn't use that because of the Saturday Night Live copyright. What was great was Gail Ann Hurd ended up executive producing. And she had worked with James Cameron and was like, you know what? I can see how this can be a smaller budgeted, effects driven movie that is going to survive on the personality of the characters. You talked about Aliens. I mean, it's very similar in that vein, where we are as engaged by the interaction of the characters as we are by any of the horror / action sequences.
There's that genre of what I call blue collar horror. You know, just people just trying to go about their daily lives and something unexpected. You know, aliens, they're just truckers. And all of a sudden they pull over and suddenly there's a killer on board. You know, it's that kind of idea. But they're just, and in the same way as Alien is of, you know, they're all just people. They're just trying to do what they do with what they got, Daniel. They're just trying to do that. So it's not like, oh, I'm the best there is at this thing and I'm a guy, you know, it's just like, no, it's like Val and Earl are sucking crap out of septic tanks.
Yeah, they're not particularly good at their job.
Yeah, but everything ties into everything else. It's like they come up with the idea to use the cat to pull the flatbed because you see him using it to move trash early in the movie. Yep. The movie starts with him joking about Stampede, and that ties all the way to the end. So I'm serious when I say this should be taught in film school, as ways to how everything is useful in a script, how efficiency of character, building tension. It's like these guys watched Jaws and learned all the correct lessons, which I don't think the writers of the sequels of Jaws learned those lessons.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think it's great to have the same writers for the next two sequels, or do they do the first four?
I think they were all involved in the first four, and then we switched gears. But you're talking about music, Daniel. I mean, we have it's Ernest Troost, who has that kind of country western feel to it. But then they also had Robert Folk come on, and he's not credited in the film, but he added a lot of the kind of more majestic, atmospheric strains, the ones that feel more like a monster movie. Trust's score provides a lot of atmosphere, that kind of western atmosphere, but it wasn't providing necessarily the punch that we needed for the action and the dramatic scenes. So there's a nice blend of those two. I think it really, as you said, Daniel, I think the score works really well.
It also looks like a movie. You know, it has the benefit of, like, as opposed to all of the other sequels that were made for home video release. So they're, you know, particularly early on when they're shot for a different aspect ratio and everything like that. This the wide vistas and just the scenery and, like that shot. I always think of that shot of them pole vaulting amongst the rocks. And you really can play with distance and perspective when you're framing a film out that way. It doesn't have the same restrictions that the other movies are faced with.
Melvin, the obnoxious little kid, my wife and I were watching, and we're like, who does he actually belong to? Does he belong to the mom with the girl?
I think it's the guy who gets eaten in
it's
the
his
tire.
dad, right? His dad
That's
gets eaten
his
in the
dad.
tire. I'm not quite
They
sure who
don't-
he belongs to ever. He's just kind of like this rogue feral kid that runs around annoying people.
Yeah, I feel like the only hint that that's his dad is when he dies, and it's the
Right.
first like, you got to do something.
Yeah. But I mean, like, why not have him say my dad or anything? Yeah. It's like there's no
You're
attachment.
not that close.
Yeah, exactly. Clearly.
I'd also want to give it a shout out to Rhonda, the female lead in the movie as well. Capable, smart, like it's funny because Val lists off his list of what he wants in a woman, and she's none of those things. But that woman that Val wants would have gotten them all killed like in the first 5 minutes. So it's a good performance, and I like the way she bounces off both Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, Finn Carter playing Rhonda is, and it's interesting you say that because that list that Val ticks off, I was thinking that is probably like every Hollywood casting agent going, well, we need this, and this, and this. And then Finn Carter walks in the room and you go, or it could be that, or it could be somebody who's really appealing, has a great personality, is attractive and is resourceful and fills the role exactly like what you need. So yeah, I'm delighted by Finn Carter. I love her in this movie. I wish she'd gone on to have a bigger career. She did work some after this, but yeah, I think she's a great counterpoint, and she does feel real in the way that all of these other key characters feel real. Kevin Bacon is the only one who really looks like a movie star, with his hat and his hair, but beyond that, like everybody feels really grounded and real. And I gotta say, Victor Wong is one of my absolute favorite. I love him as an actor, period. Anytime he shows up, he makes the movie better. But I was sorry to see him go down as quickly as he did, and I was sorry he had to go down at all.
I screamed, "No, not Ed Shin!"
And I also think for her character, they always turn to her.
Yep.
And she even, in World, she's like, I don't know. Stop asking me.
You're the only scientist in the group.
Yeah, she reminds me a lot of like Kurt Russell's response when in The Thing, when he's like, "I don't know, I'm here with you.
Yeah,
I'm in the. It's just like I'm just spitballing as well. Why are you turning to me? Do the words unprecedented mean nothing to you?"
But we need to talk about the most underappreciated actor in this, beyond Charlotte Stewart, the poor man's Dee Wallace Stone.
Yes, thank you.
Fred Ward's hairline deserves a credit of its own. He has the most killer hairline in all of Hollywood. It practically starts at the top of his nose.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because as I was watching the second one, I was like, wow, his hair is terrible in the second one, but long hair just doesn't fit.
They gave him Kevin Bacon's hair.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're contractually obligated to have Kevin Bacon's hair in this film.
Let's actually move forward into the second film, AFTERSHOCKS, which came along 6 years later, and it was made for the direct-to-video market. We lose Kevin Bacon, as will come a theme as characters just start dropping off of the series. But we got Fred Ward kind of taking over the lead, and he is joined by a new character, Grady, who I'm going to just say right now was my least favorite sidekick in all of the Tremors movies.
And believe me, it's a race towards the bottom with a lot of the sidekicks. I mean, so for Grady to pull out so far ahead of everybody else, it's really an accomplishment in itself.
Do you think maybe you see yourself the most in Grady? And
Is
you're
that
like,
what it is?
everything I hate in myself is Grady.
Yes, I too was driving a cab in a town of 15 people. That's, that's.
And I had also seen, this was the only one I had seen prior to prepping for this episode. And I remember watching it as part of an October marathon. And I remember being kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Like I had just kind of similar to Mark before he was snatched by the internet gods.
Or graboids.
Yeah, who knows what's on the other side of that camera. I was so enamored of the original that I was kind of like, this directed to video sequel 6 years later is not really appealing to me. But I finally caught up with it and I was like, okay, this is actually kind of fun. I like where they go with it, with the Shriekers. I like the evolution of it.
Again, I think the writing, especially for the first three, having that same writing team, we're like, okay, where do we take it next to make it still interesting so it's not the same thing? And having the characters react within the world they've created in the same way. And you could tell influenced by Gremlins with the Shriekers. I don't think they named the Shriekers in the second one, though. I think that might be the third one. They name them Shriekers.
I think you're right that we kind of go through the evolution of them.
I'd like to pretend sometimes that much like Jurassic Park, there's just one really awesome movie. And then, everything else is just kind of like fan fiction to a certain degree. But it's that thing of, and I feel the same way about once you introduce Superman into anything, it's like, okay, so the first one, they were unprecedented. They've never seen these things before. Right. They're not in the fossil history. There's nothing. They've come out of nowhere and we're dealing with them. Now they're a thing. I'm like, do you really need Fred Ward to handle these things? It's like the Mexican government has offered you anything you need to fight the graboids. You know what I need? I need the Mexican army to come and fight, because really all I'm going to do is blow it up anyways. So that's my only issue with, not my only issue, but it's the main issue I have going forward. It's like, doesn't this seem like a Superman type of situation? Isn't this something that like more people should be involved in solving this problem rather than just two guys?
Yes, you two.
Get a government squad on this, for God's sakes. Nuke them from space. It's the only way to be sure,
Right. Well, I think part of it is that they go to Fred Ward because he's the expert, and because he's down on his luck, he wants to keep it quiet so that they can have all the money. Yeah. So they're not going big, and even though for all his protestation that he's not going to be able to, you can't deal with these things, that they're dangerous. The money lures him in. I thought it kicked off pretty solid with the kind of drilling and the one guy going down in the jaws of the graboid. And I really like how Burt Gummer gets brought back in. I like how he becomes kind of friendly help and competition for Grady and Earl, who are down there in Mexico trying to bag as many graboids as they can. And my favorite moment is when Burt Gummer shoots a Shrieker in half and annihilates the wall and the vehicle behind the wall. Yes. I was like, that was funny. I did not see that coming.
And again, they give him a great line. I think he's like, how was I supposed to know?
Yeah, exactly. I was told they were under the ground. I needed maximum penetration.
I do love that they go from the sound to then heat.
Yep.
Like, trying to make an evolution and keep it engaging.
And the evolution is something they kind of concentrate on and do a lot of lip service to, but they, to me, made the biology of the graboids super muddy as well. Like I was looking at the tongue count on the graboids, and most of the time I only saw like one tongue, and it wasn't really as articulated as any of the ones in the first film. It's like their tongue budget was cut. They talk about the Shriekers, coming out of the graboids, being birthed by the graboid and eating their way out. But the number of them in this film, I believe somebody said that 6 came out. And in subsequent films, they limit that to 3.
Yeah.
Which seems about right. He's got 3 tongues. Maybe the tongues are what evolves into the Shriekers. I don't know. I think my beef with this movie is I don't really love the Shriekers. And you had a perfectly good villain, a perfectly good monster with the graboids that they just don't do much at all with.
Yeah, agreed. Considering how much mileage they're able to get out of it in the first film, the fact that they really lean into the Shriekers for the second one, I think just to kind of provide an above ground menace which doesn't necessarily do them any favors.
Well, and something we didn't talk about with the first one is how smart the graboids get. Like they make the trap with the tractor. This one, the graboids continually just keep eating their toy cars with the dynamite and never learn.
There should have been a scene with them spitting one back out at them or something.
Yeah, that they figured it out.
Yeah, the first one was, making a larger B movie, but still having a modest or moderate budget. They were very thoughtful about how they would do things, and it didn't feel cheap or like they were trying to go on the cheap. There something about the Shriekers are just puppets in front of a green screen, and on modern day televisions it kind of looks like a puppet in front of a green screen. So it's that thing of like, and believe me, they have all the sympathy in the world for me of like making anything and trying to do it and make it look good and having a small budget. I just like, I feel the same way about Jaws 2 of like, oh, well, we had all this success. What was successful? Well, let's give them more shark. It's like, no, what was successful was Dreyfuss and Shaw and Scheider. And what was successful about Tremors was Bacon and Ward. And in this one, Grady is no Kevin Bacon. It's like they don't have the history. They don't have that relationship. They don't, there's Bert comes in eventually, but and him and Fred, I would have much rather have seen Bert and Fred Ward from the beginning.
Yep.
And like have that sort of contentious relationship of people who have history together rather than some guy driving a cab with weightlifting gloves. I'm like, that's all I see of Grady in my mind.
Yeah.
Helen Shaver, always lovely to see. Now a director in Hollywood. She directed some of my favorite episodes of The Penguin this season.
And she does a great job of kind of being our Basil exposition of explaining what's going on in terms of the heat. She's the science of the bunch.
Yeah. But she was maybe the best actor in this whole movie. I made that note. I was just like, she's amazing. Plus she's kind of the hottie age appropriate love interest. So
that's right. Well, she's Miss October, I think, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Tremors 3, we had to wait 5 years for Tremors 3 to come along. And we get introduced to another permutation of the graboids, of the monsters, with, I wish, well, this is where I went, okay, this is for kids now, because we're going to call them ass blasters. And I'm like, okay, so we're just going to hear ass blasters the entirety of this movie. But this is the only, I think, PG rated one of the bunch. I think all the others are PG-13, but I think this one somehow clocked in at PG.
Somehow I feel like they went back to perfection just to kill Miguel. I mean, like really, Miguel's the one who's got to go down. He's the only one from the original who's got to die. It's got to be Miguel. Okay, fine, whatever.
But it was a nice family reunion of most of the actors from the first film who weren't Kevin Bacon or
Fred Ward,
or Finn, coming back, and including Pogo Stick Girl, who I was like, now who is this? And it took me a couple of minutes to go, oh, that's Pogo Stick Girl. That's right.
Yep.
Like 15 years have gone by since we've seen this girl.
And they actually brought her back. And I was like, that's cool. But we also get, Chang's granddaughter. I forget which.
Niece.
Is it a niece? Okay. But yeah, Jodie Chang, played by Susan Cheong. But yeah, I think she's a good performance. And Sean Christian is our new sidekick for Bert, who is, I think, doing a pretty passable Brad Pitt impression from Thelma and Louise or Fight Club or whatever version of Brad Pitt he's trying to do. But he's doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, certainly more Thelma and Louise, true romance Brad Pitt. He's not as sharp as Fight Club Brad Pitt, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, he's, passable himbo. He's, trying to find that chemistry, someone to work off Michael Gross. Reba McEntire worked really well off Michael Gross, and Fred Ward.
Well, who would have guessed that Burt Gummer was going to become central to the series anyway? Because he's such he has some dimension in the first one, but you just wouldn't think, this is a one joke character. You wouldn't think you could build a franchise around this guy. And I think if it's similar to Reggie from the Phantasm series, where you're like, the ice cream man is going to be the guy that we're going to follow through 5 movies, but you end up following him through 5 movies. And
Well, he was the only one that kept saying yes.
And this really, he does take center stage on this one. So let's talk about kind of the evolution of Burt Gummer.
Reba McEntire just wasn't going to come back, because she had her thing. So you have to figure out because they are so tight and connected in the first, they're a unit in the first movie, that once again, there are real world financial and whatever business reasons why this person's not coming back. So you have to come up with an in-story reason why we can't allow this, like why Val and Rhonda went off, why Fred Ward went, I do like that he is kind of bottomed out in a way that it's like he did lose the love of his life over his competing sort of interests, and the fact that he does kind of have a redemption arc-ish in this movie. I think of the people who are there, he is the person to sort of hang the story on. If you're going to go back to redemption, it's got to be either he's becomes the center or he doesn't come back at all. It's that thing of, well, if he's our guy, the story's got to be about the guy. He can't just be the survivalist comic relief. He's got to have some stakes to it. And I think Michael, like I said, Michael Gross can handle it. He has the capability. But is that thing of like, oh, it's all or nothing on Burt Gummer at this point, because he's the only person who's been in the other two as well.
And it's lucky that it worked. It's lucky that it worked out. Yeah. That he was an actor who could fully flesh out this character and make him relatable and enjoyable and our hero.
Looking at the script and the evolution, like Tremors is a type of movie, if you just redid it, they'd be making the same discoveries kind of a deal. And I feel like having Burt, you have an actual expert each time. So it keeps the story evolving and moving forward rather than just restarting from the beginning. Because they all keep it like there's not going to be a Graboid in the city to heighten it.
Graboids take Manhattan.
Yep. Even though this is 2001, we're in the early days of CGI. The ass blasters are my least favorite incarnation because they really look cheap. They look like, what they are, which is digital effects, whereas the Shriekers and the Graboids always had a real world quality to them. And I never get that from the ass blasters. This one suffered a little bit in that regard as well.
I also love that it's longer than the first two. I thought when I was
watching
the
first one is the shortest.
Yeah.
The first one is 90 minutes and every other one is like an hour 45. And I'm like, really, you don't need to go the extra mile, folks. You could do a nice lean 90 minutes and we'd be okay.
There are so many things brought up, like the himbo and Chang's niece. It's like, oh, they're the relationship? I thought the pogo stick girl was into the himbo, and that was it's like, but no, then they've just dropped that, and then it's a story about her and her mom and them bonding together. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Once again, maybe that's some of the 15 minutes that could have been cut out of this movie and get it down to that 90 minutes.
I wonder if that, because I think the TV series, like this movie was supposed to set up the TV series, because aren't those characters still in the TV series? Like, I wonder if that they were trying to keep an evolution going.
Michael Gross does the greatest move that is so authentic to his character. When he goes to type in his code to open the door to his bunker, he uses his body to block the camera's view of his code. I was like, that is just marvelous.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, if we're moving forward or / back, because we are going into the past for Tremors 4, The Legend Begins from 2004, which is a prequel. And it's set kind of in the Old West. And it gives Michael Gross, since he's now our de facto lead, it gives him an opportunity to do something different. He's playing his ancestor, and he's not the right-wing gun nut. In fact, he's never used a gun before at all. Not only do we get Billy Drago, who I think is utterly delightful in this movie. It may be one of my favorite things I've seen Billy Drago in, because I haven't seen him do a lot of comedy. And so to see him kind of flexing his laugh muscles, I was very pleased with that. But we get Juan Padilla in the form of Brent Rowan. And I think he provides a nice counterbalance to, but this is truly an ensemble piece again. The Gummer character is the main character, but this is where I went, this is for kids. Okay, I see where they're going with the series now.
Well, I feel that Prey walk the same ground much better. There is an interesting idea about dealing with this monster without even the benefit of the guns that Burt has in the first movie.
You're talking about the Predator reboot?
Yes. Prey from
recent
the Predator reboot of going back in time and seeing how people with less technology would deal with the same problem, when you don't have the M60 that you can just tote around and deal with your issues that way. I do like that it's like these people are in financial straits. It's like, well, we gave up everything to move out here.
That's right.
And now the place, it's very enemy of the people. It's like, oh, our main source of industry is poison and it's going to kill us if we stay, but we can't afford to go anywhere else. So it gives people stakes to do the things that they do in the movie.
Yeah, weird plot point from the third movie on. They deal with real estate a lot.
Eminent domain.
Yeah.
This was my first time. I think I probably saw the first 3 Tremors at some point on video, but I had never seen this one because I think this was like a Sci-Fi Channel original or something like that. I kind of dug it. It had a neat way to set up the town itself, the town that eventually becomes Perfection, and then you have like Chang's ancestors there as well, and setting up, people that will eventually become important characters. Billy Drago, as you said, just worth his weight in gold. I've been terrified of that man since he played Frank Needy in the Untouchables. So he's always an excellent villain. He's
equal parts villain and hero in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lost him, I literally shouted at the TV, "Not Billy Drago."
Like, I feel like this is the first one that really looks made for TV. Quality. Like the second and third hinted at it, but they were already so low budget, kind of akin to the first, and I thought that third one did a great job recreating Perfection. But this one especially, I was like, oh yeah, this is like sound quality, the film quality was just a little lower.
Well, and I feel like we very much go back to just the Graboids.
Yeah.
And so we get less of them, less monster action in general. We get a lot more snake action, a lot more snake tongue tentacle action. But again, I think that is, budgetary constraint. They're going, what can we do with less? But I enjoyed it. I was pleased at how invested you become in all of the characters and how all the characters get enough weight that you can care about them.
Yeah, it almost feels like a gift to Michael Gross to be like, we're going to let you do something that we're still going to pay you. We're going to let you do something else. And, the way his character changes over the course of the movie. It's almost like a Bob Hope movie of like Fancy Pants comes to perfection and gets eaten or gets attacked by graboids. It's this idea of like this Eastern dandy and him learning to care about people and, having characters to invest. He invests in the characters and therefore you invest in the characters as well.
I kept waiting for Hiram Gummer's Derby, though, to somehow get an Atlanta Hawks logo on it.
Or just an actual hawk take the hat.
Yeah.
That's why he has to get a new hat.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever explained why he needed to get a new hat.
Nope.
Do we have theories as to why in the world he needed to change from the Hawks to the Cubs?
That's where he met Jasmine, was in Chicago. And that's where Jamie Kennedy was birthed.
I thought it was Florida.
It was Florida.
Oh no, you're right. It was Florida.
Okay,
right. It was Florida. Then I have no theories.
That would have been better.
It would have been, yeah.
I was all ready to buy into that, and I went, no,
yeah, me too.
Shoot.
Well, I think it's what Chris said. He did a show in Chicago.
That's it. Michael Gross said, "I'm wearing this hat." I love this hat. Moving forward into Tremors 5, Bloodlines, 2015, which is 11 years later, they decide to revive this franchise. And I can just imagine being Michael Gross and getting that call and going, really? We're going to do another Tremors movie. But they bring in Jamie Kennedy, who I think is maybe the first worthwhile Burt Gummer sidekick that we've had. I don't know what other people's feelings were, but I'm like, this is somebody who does comedy. And I think, kind of going back to the first one, people who know how to do comedy and do it fully invested. I feel like Jamie Kennedy is a funny guy, but he feels invested in the situation. It doesn't feel like he's just making jokes, which is how I felt about Grady.
Yeah, he's not standing outside of the action and commenting on it. His responses are visceral to what's happening in the moment.
And they kind of add the heart in with him, like, his backstory that he's his kid.
Right.
And like Grady was just like, I just want to be cool. Hunt these worms.
And I do want to throw this out there that given the jumps in years between these sequels coming out, I hope to God I age as well as Michael Gross does.
Right?
He looks amazing throughout. Quite frankly, he looks the same from 1985 until now. I know that's not true, but in my mind, that's how he always looks.
Well, and I like that they keep playing with his hair, just doing different looks. Like they acknowledge the fact that time has passed and he's rocking a different look these days. Don Michael Paul is the director of the next three. And I feel like he really brought an energy to it that there's an urgency to these films. And, technology has caught up enough that you can do low budget movies with some pretty decent special effects. Like I really enjoy the special effects from 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
They look better than like 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Once again, just story wise, the only issue I kind of have with it is like, if they can jump out of the ground and fly through the air and land on somebody, then they don't need to be graboids so much anymore. It's not the whole like these tongues coming out and pulling things down. But I will admit it was amusing as hell. I had a great time with the ride, but I'm like, well, are they even graboids anymore? What's going on here?
Right. Well, and I like that we start to go to different places, we went back in time for 4. Now we're going to go to Africa. Now we're going to go to the Antarctic. Now we're going to go to an island. If you ever wanted a graboid to be James Bond, here's your opportunity to see what they would be like in different environments.
But my fear is this our Ernest Goes to Africa moment? As the credits began to roll, I was like, this got to go one of two ways. But I thought it went a very good way.
Yeah.
I did kind of wonder, did they set this one in Africa and have so many African-American or African, actually, I guess it could be African actors, because they have none in the first 5 movies.
Also, some of it was they filmed it in South Africa. They filmed this and Cold Day in Hell in South Africa because of tax breaks. So that's a part of it as well. So yes, the Antarctic is actually
and it's not. I was
South Africa.
I was going to correct myself. It's not Antarctica.
Yeah.
It's Canada anyway. So.
Yeah, and it's actually South Africa. So there you go. But yeah, I mean,
it looked a lot like sand.
I have nothing for or against Jamie Kennedy. He's just a guy trying to make a living like much people else. But I do think that you're right. He's there and he's playing the part. He's not playing Jamie Kennedy. He's playing this character, and he has his reasons for being there and being invested the way he is. And I think that actually works to the point that, like, when we get to Shrieker Island, I actually like John Hader as well, but I kind of miss with given what happens in that movie that it's not Jamie Kennedy.
And I like that Jamie Kennedy has his superpower of, riding motorcycles. It's like that's a fun thing to add in. It's something we haven't seen yet from another character. They use their characters and they use their environments, I think, really well. And we have a new ensemble that we get invested in pretty quickly. That's also impressive. The fact that they introduce all of these new characters and we go, okay, I can tell you all apart and I actually care about you and I don't want you to die.
I would like to give the Tremors series some credit because I make fun of it that they didn't have any African-American actors until Tremors 5, but they have a pretty wildly diverse cast regardless.
Yes, they do. It's too bad that, like the leads are always Caucasian, but yes, I do. I like the fact that it's pretty multicultural in that we have an Asian, we have a Mexican, we have, it's like we are definitely trying to spread it out amongst the supporting cast, and that goes throughout the series. I mean, we see that in 4 and 5 and on through.
And in this one, I still feel like they try to give Michael Gross fun acting moments as well. Like this one, him in the cage always sticks out with me.
I could watch that on repeat all day long.
Yep.
I never thought I would see Mr. Keaton drinking his own urine. That's just not something I was expecting to see in my lifetime, but it works.
Yeah, I made the note that that's maybe the funniest scene in Tremors history. And of course, he has camouflage underwear on.
Well, and I feel like these last 3 are kind of a piece. I mean, they do feel like Burt Gummer goes to Canada, Burt Gummers goes to the tropics, and time passes in between. But the fact that they're close enough together, 2015, 2018, 2020, they do feel like we're getting the same Burt Gummer in different places. We're getting new supporting actors, and we feel like there's a momentum to it.
I still find it interesting that I don't feel like they picked up new audiences with 5, 6, 7. Like I feel like it was still
and I wish they had.
Yeah, because they're still teaching at a college. No one knows what Tremors is, and I'm like, well, there was one that just came out like in 2020.
And I when I was ranking them, I actually feel like between 5 and 6 are my second favorite sequel. The first one is far and away my favorite, but I would say I actually enjoy when Jamie Kennedy comes in and you get the dynamic of Bert and his son and them, trying to save the world from graboids. I'm like, that's more fun to me than Fred Ward and Grady.
Which is, it also makes me wonder in 2018 when they tried to reboot it with another series with Kevin Bacon, I don't think they had Michael Gross involved in that pilot.
Well, you were the one who told me for the first that the 2018 pilot even existed. And, the fact that it's never gotten any kind of release, it played once at Fantastic Fest, I think, and that was it. It is sat in the vaults from there on out. I don't know what's going on there.
I remember when the trailer came out, and I remember it looking really interesting and engaging.
Yeah, but you can't get it anywhere, so.
I agree with you that, like, Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward had chemistry and history. That's important when you're telling a story like this.
Yeah.
So even though Michael Gross is meeting Jamie Kennedy for the first time, there's still history that gets revealed, and Jamie Kennedy has a reason other than being a himbo to be there. It's like he wants to get to know this person who is his father, and his father doesn't know who he is. So there's something there, and there's a reason why he sometimes puts up with the abuse, is because he wants to get to know his dad rather than just we need a Kevin Bacon looking dude in here.
So props to the guy I call South African Nick Nolte, actor Ian Roberts, who was the helicopter pilot. I would watch a movie with him and Burt Gummer. I would watch several films of just them. Yeah. I thought they were great.
Yeah, agreed. I think the supporting cast for Bloodlines is really solid and fun. Who's our scientist? The female character, Pearl Thusi, plays Dr. Nandi Matubu. But she's terrific. And kind of her sidekick, her love interest, he's really good as well. So yeah, I get invested in these characters quickly, and I think that's a credit. Kind of speaking to why there aren't new Tremors fans, I think the idea that, like, here we are, Tremors 5, Tremors 6, Tremors 7, people are just like, it can't be very good. That's just the mentality, is like, I'm not going to start a series that's already 5 movies in. There's no chance that this could be inspired material, which is why I was so pleasantly surprised. It's like, no, I'm actually enjoying this far more than I was enjoying 2 and 3.
And I think, going from theatrical to straight to movie, the only other monster one I could think of was like the Anaconda series. But the quality of those is nowhere near, I think, as good as the quality of all of the Tremors ones.
Well, and the fact that it's coming from, Universal as opposed to like the Sci-Fi Network, like there's clearly some money, and I think that shows. Like, there's a quality in terms of getting actors who can perform, getting the effects that are worthwhile. Like, I think there's a reason why it functions, and I think that's because it's coming from Universal as opposed to a low budget Asylum knockoff.
I loved 1. I saw 2. And then I didn't see any of them until you asked me to join this panel. And I'm a huge Tremors fan, but almost because I love the first movie so much,
right?
There's that hesitancy to be like, oh, what are they going to do with it? You know?
Right. And then you find out that the people who made the sequels actually love the movie as well, and they actually invest some care in it. And I was like, oh, well, that's a pleasant surprise. It doesn't feel like a cash grab. The last 3. They don't feel like cash grabs. And to be honest, I think like 4 doesn't really feel like a cash grab. It feels like, what else can we do with this? Let's go back in time and see what it would be like if you didn't have the technology. Any thoughts about Cold Day in Hell? Set in Canada, not Antarctica. Settle down, internet.
Yeah.
I like that they go back to when Bert was eaten in number 3, and that becomes a pivotal plot point in this one.
Yes. Yeah. The fact that pays off, the fact that somebody went, you know what can we extract and bring forward so we don't have to invent something completely new.
And we go back to real estate in this one. Isn't that the contract at the end where like they won't do something to Perfection Valley?
Actually, I think that was Tremors 3. I think the end of Tremors.
It's both.
It's both.
It's both actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't have
3 is he has the albino tremor that is an endangered species, so they can't do so.
That's it.
Melvin.
Yeah, so Melvin can't do anything with his new development. And then, but the reason Bert keeps getting pulled into all this stuff is that he's in tax trouble with the US. So basically solving this problem for the government allows him to not have to pay. He gets forgiven for his back taxes and not have to pay any taxes in the future, which, as we find out in Shrieker Island, doesn't even matter because he lives on an island
because he's had enough.
Not in Perfection Valley. So,
and I thought the opening of Shrieker Island with the introduction of Bert there, I was like, that's so great. I love that Michael Gross was sitting around growing a beard for 6 months and shows up doing the Tom Hanks from Castaway lookalike contest. And I wish he'd have kept it a little bit longer. If he'd kept that look just a little bit longer, he goes right back to the Burt Gummer we know and love pretty quick. But
I have to say, I was not expecting Old Man Logan in my Tremors movie.
Yeah.
Like, this ends exactly the same as Logan does, down to the cross on the grave. I was like, truly was not expecting Burt Gummer to go out. I actually, like, if I don't want to get into my rankings just yet, but I would say this is like either my second or third favorite of the franchise. And some of that's Richard Brake, the great
my
Richard
gosh.
Brake coming in. And some of it's, this is why I miss, if you're going to give me Jamie Kennedy as his son in 5 and 6, to not have him there when he finally goes down, I'm like, what was going on in Jamie Kennedy's life that he couldn't make time?
Right. Yeah.
For this right now.
Well, that's where I wonder if it was money. I'm like, oh man, this would have been the right trilogy. But yeah, the Burt and Travis trilogy, I would have warmed to that greatly. And I mean, again, I was watching John Heder and going, all right, I'm glad you're working, I suppose. I was invested in the Travis character at that point.
I just wanted him to play it exactly like Napoleon Dynamite.
I thought, yeah, that would have been interesting.
Travis makes the most sense. His mom is there. His dad is there.
Right.
His dad dies at the end. It would make sense for it to be Travis.
Yeah.
But if Jamie Kennedy doesn't want to go back, or he's been, I don't know. I honestly don't know anything about his life or where he's at or what's going on. But, there may be backstage reasons why he didn't come back. But it really kind of it's like, oh man, it's like you said, it's a trilogy of the 3 of them. And particularly introducing the mother at the end, you want that family dynamic there rather than just drunk PhD student John Heder.
Yeah, agreed.
And there is something about the 7th. Oh, what are we on now? 7th. The 7th one that does go back to character-driven stuff. Even like the villain, Bert's trying to redeem him by trying to give up the hunt and stuff, which is really interesting. That they're trying to make it more human than just, or the humans are the monsters. They kind of avoid that a little bit too in that one.
You get all the way to 7 before you finally have a graboid pull somebody down through an outhouse. I'm like, how did it take that long?
That's why we had to have 7.
Yeah.
But Richard Brake he's somebody he's such a commanding presence. I love watching him do anything. And I wish he'd been given just a little more nuance other than just being dedicated to the hunt and winning. He's kind of the flip side of Burt Gummer, the one that we knew back in the first film. And it would have been nice to see him humanized a little bit. I'm wishing for a movie that existed differently as opposed to the one that I got.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the movie you want to see versus...
Which I feel like we've been talking about a lot with Shrieker Island.
Yeah, it's that thing of, I feel the same. I feel like the first Tremors movie was every time you thought it was going to zig, it zagged. And it kept getting more interesting as it went along. And it carried you. It's joyful in a certain way of like...
Yeah.
Sure, their lives are in danger, but it's amusing and entertaining, and it keeps you invested. And it does so because it's unexpected. If I had a great time going through this series, don't get me wrong, everything else is exactly what you would expect. I think there are certain interesting ideas raised, but they kind of shy away from them and go with a more traditional outcome. Plus, Richard Brake just kind of like falls off a bridge. It's like he gets pulled down, but it's not even the most, like the guy getting pulled through the outhouse is, you think they would save that death for the main villain of the piece, something that horrible to happen to somebody. Like I said, it is unexpected in that they do Logan Burt Gummer, but it doesn't have that same sort of unexpected quality of the first movie.
Right. I mean, the surprise is that, I guess we're really being done with this series now.
Yeah.
Like this is the last James Bond kind of thing.
And they try to close the loop by referencing Val and Earl.
Yep.
This is what they did.
Yep. Coming back all the way around.
I did feel like they kind of raised the stakes on one of the Tremors tropes, which is the raining of guts, which happens in every movie. They all get splashed with orange Tremor guts. And they just did a real like slow-mo, super high def. I was so glad I rented this in high def version of that in that movie.
Speaking of circling back around, any final thoughts on the Tremors franchise? I liked how this conversation has kind of danced back and forth. I feel like this is a franchise that definitely remembers where it came from and is always pushing forward. And not every franchise is willing to do that. They either just go in a completely different direction or they just retread. I had never seen anything beyond 2, and watching 7 Tremors movies, my wife was consistently asking why, and I'm glad it turned out to be as rewarding experience as it was.
I'm curious. Before Mark left, he wanted to talk about the F-bomb. I don't remember an F-bomb.
I think the Tremors F-bomb was when they all jump off of the concrete wall and the graboid slams into the back of that wall. And once they determine, he's well and truly dead, that's when Val goes, "Fuck you."
Okay.
Oh, now I remember it. I thought it was great. Truly. I mean, I think it's again because I watched them. I mean, I was born in 90. So, I think I probably watched the first one when
you go to hell first of all.
I'm the same. I'm about to celebrate my 35th anniversary.
Yeah.
And, I think seeing it at a young age, like truly, I think I saw it maybe 8 or 9. So I kind of grew up with it and was always shocked when there was a new one that it has a special relevance to me that I just, kind of find fun. I'm a sucker for this franchise.
I really wouldn't mind one more Tremors movie with as much of the cast as they could cobble together, including Michael Gross. We didn't see his body. He could still be out there.
That's right.
He's returned to looking like David Letterman living on an island.
No, I think that's legit, Eric. I think that's right. We didn't see his body, and therefore he can come back, and I'll be okay with it.
And then I want him to do a Family Ties reunion movie with him in that beard just to scare Tina Yothers to death.
Chris?
The first one, I watch Tremors at least once a year. I really enjoy it. I love the dynamic between all of the characters. Like I said, as somebody who's written scripts myself, I think it's interesting to study and its efficiency and how it does everything so well and seamlessly. You know, as far as the rest of them, I'm always happy to see Michael Gross pick up a paycheck. I really am. He understands the assignment and he aces it every single time. The movies don't always match the quality of his performance, you know, because you get a Grady in there. But once they like find the right chemistry, I really think, like you said, I think Jamie Kennedy pairs off him well and gives him something to invest in as well. So yeah, I had a great time. I had many enjoyable hours with them.
I thank you all for knowing you were going to be at the end of the rainbow here, because as I was watching, I was like going, I'm actually going to be looking forward to chatting about these. As I kept thinking back to the Leprechaun movies that we did last year, and we made our way through all 8 of those. And that was another franchise where I was like, I was not expecting to have as much fun with these as I did. Leprechaun 4, everybody should see it. And Leprechaun 8, actually the best of the Leprechauns. Like, these are discoveries I was not anticipating, and similar to, you know, coming to the end of the Tremors series and be like, I really enjoy the latter sequels more than the earlier ones. So again, this was a great ride, and thank you all for taking it with me and having a conversation that equaled the pleasure of watching them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.